Hi, I'm Vedavyas. I'm founder of Y3 Leadership Community. I am an integrated leadership coach and I'm a certified NLP Master Practitioner. Welcome to Parts Integration Series. This is the second video in the series. In the first video, we looked at what parts integration is, along with some very powerful examples. And generally, when we say parts integration, we are talking about two different parts in oneself and how we can integrate them. And in this video, we are looking at a slightly different application of parts integration. So now we'll be looking at two different parts in the society, not necessarily in one individual, but when there are two different parts in a social situation, how do we integrate them? So this is going to be very interesting. Let's get into that. Yeah. So I shared my screen and we are in the second video in the series, as I told. And so we'll be discussing this in two parts. So first we'll look at what this third alternative is, and we'll also look at a very powerful example of Nelson Mandela, and then we'll go even deeper into this concept. So as I told, this is parts integration on the social level. And for this, we'll be exploring Stephen Covey's work. So I'm a big fan of Stephen Covey's work, and I have some of his important books with me, as you can see. So one of his initial books is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And after many years, he also wrote the book The Eighth Habit. So the eighth habit, he tells that it's not something that is somehow he missed in the 7 habits, and so he wrote one more habit. It's like an reorganization of the 7 habits, and in the 7 habits, he wrote books specifically on some of those things. So the third habit, putting first things first, he wrote a book on that, and the sixth habit, synergize, and the powerful concept in that, the third alternative, he wrote a book on that as well. So Seth Godin, a very famous author, so he says Stephen Covey's most important book, The Third Alternative. So we'll be looking at this work also as a glimpse in the section where we go deeper into this. And now let us first understand what this third alternative is in the context of parts integration. Now, so how Stephen Covey looks at this concept of third alternative is, so generally, so we have come across many such situations if we go back and think. A person has a certain alternative, and another person, like another party, has another alternative. And generally, what happens is there is a conflict between these two alternatives. And at best, many of the times, what happens is a compromise. Okay, let us go your way to a certain extent and this way to a certain extent. Let's do some compromise. And many think this is the best way of doing things. Now, what Stephen Covey proposes is there is a much better way of doing it, which is the third alternative. So the third alternative is, so there is a first alternative, there is second alternative, or let's call this is my way and this is your way. So first, I will understand what is the essence of this alternative, my way. What is it that I really want? I'll understand the essence of this. And I'll understand your way or this other alternative. Again, the very essence. Maybe there are various things around it which may not be in sync, but what is the very essence of this? So I'll try to really understand, really go deeper into this. And now I will try to come up with another alternative which satisfies the very core of the first alternative and the very core, the very essence of the second alternative. So this third alternative has the very essence of these two alternatives, and also this is a much improvised, a much more better, a much more powerful way of doing things. So this is what we call as the third alternative. And so Stephen Covey says, this is where 1 plus 1 becomes greater than 2. So generally 1 plus 1 is 2, right? But here this has a lot of third possibility. Third alternative has a lot of possibilities. So this can open up so many possibilities and doors. So it can become 1 plus 1 is equals to 3, 1 plus 1 is equals to 10, 1 plus 1 is equal to 100. There are so many things. A lot of creativity can be involved in this. And we looked at a theory. Now let's look at a very powerful example where something like this really happened, and it has inspired millions of people. Let's look at the life of Nelson Mandela. Again, Nelson Mandela is a huge inspiration for me, like huge. So many times when there is some kind of a very troubling situation in my life where I feel stuck and all this is going on, I just remind myself of Nelson Mandela, and I'll ask myself, what would Mandela do? As I told, he's a huge inspiration for me. And why is Mandela so special for me? You'll understand. And I observed that many people know Nelson Mandela only to a certain extent. So Nelson Mandela is famous for, he was a revolutionary, he was the anti-apartheid activist, and he fought for the black rights, and that movement became successful, and all these things. Many people know only that part of him. Many people do not know some really powerful aspects of his life, and we'll be discussing that now. So let us use the same framework, Stephen Covey's framework, for Nelson Mandela's life. So from Nelson Mandela's perspective, my way, like Nelson Mandela's initial way. So he is an anti-apartheid activist. So for those who don't know, there has been a lot of discrimination in the countries like South Africa, the discrimination towards the blacks. In fact, Mahatma Gandhi's non-violent movement actually got incubated in South Africa when he experienced this discrimination. He was thrown out of the train because he was a black. So, and Nelson Mandela came later into that movement, which Mahatma Gandhi kind of started in South Africa. Now, now Nelson Mandela has been an activist in that movement, and he has been a revolutionary and a very fiery guy and very emotional guy and all that. And there are a whole lot of things that happened. There is a very beautiful book, Long Walk to Freedom, like an what to say, like an autobiography of Nelson Mandela. So all these things we see there. So this has been, and in the process, there are certain things that happened and all, and Nelson Mandela was sent to jail. So initially, before going to the jail, this has been the primary approach of Nelson Mandela. Now, after he went to jail, again, this is very interesting thing. The Nelson Mandela who went into the jail and the Nelson Mandela who came out of the jail, he's a very different person. The kind of maturity that he developed in this process, and again, I want you to clearly remember, jail is not an easy thing. It's very difficult. Generally, itself, jail is a very difficult thing. And I want you to understand, it was that time where blacks were not even having the basic human rights. So, I want you to imagine what will be the kind of situation for a black inside a jail. So it was a very difficult situation. To give a few examples, Nelson Mandela was a tall man, and his jail cell was kind of short. He couldn't even stretch his legs properly and be there. And at the night, they were not allowed to go to washroom. Let's say you want to, do that. You have to do in the room, and next day morning, you have to go and you can, throw that away. And generally political prisoners, they would be allowed certain privileges. For example, someone from the family died, they can go and attend the funeral. But Nelson Mandela, when his son died, he couldn't even go to the funeral. Like that, in the very prime of his life, where generally people focus on career and be with the family and all, he spent in jail for nearly 3 decades. And many people will be broken with all that. But Nelson Mandela used all that as manure to grow. And interestingly, the Bharatiya epics focus on this aspect of how a human being can grow through difficult situations. So, for example, if you take the epics such as Ramayana and Mahabharata, so in the Mahabharata also, Pandavas, the Pandavas, before they went to Vanavasa, and the Pandavas who came out after the Vanavasa and Agnatavasa, they're very, very different people. So they are very matured and very wise, and like they're very different. And the same thing you can find in Ramayana as well. So when Rama, Sita, and Lakshmana they go to the Vanavasa, they come in touch with many ashrams and many wise sages, and they hear many beautiful stories full of wisdom. So that is a wonderful period that they grew. So in our epics also, what generally people see as a difficult period is shown as a period of blossoming into wonderful human beings. And a very similar thing happened to Nelson Mandela also. And I'll give two instances. So there is this very famous quote that Nelson Mandela says. So this was, when finally he was released from the prison and things happened. So there is a beautiful quote of that time. As I walked out the door towards the gate that would lead to my freedom, I knew if I didn't leave my bitterness and hatred behind, I would still be in prison. And I'll give you one more thing. So initially, Mandela would see the blacks or the victims, and the whites are the people who are doing all these things to the whites. Uh, it's the white government which is doing all these things to the blacks. And then he realized something very profound. He began to have these conversations with the whites. For example, in the jail, also there'll be white wardens and jailers like that, right? He was having conversations with them. And then he realized they are also normal human beings like him. And they are also the victims of this cruel system of apartheid. Just like how blacks have been suffering from their childhood because of the system, the whites also got victimized in their mind because of this system. Otherwise, whites are also normal, genuine human beings. So he began to empathize with the whites. So we looked at these two things, right? My way and your way. So, in the your way, Nelson Mandela began to understand the very core of this, what is actually happening. And then something very beautiful happened. And of course, Nelson Mandela was released from the jail, and he became the first black head of the state, the elected representative. And many people, especially the whites and many people across the world, they were afraid that after Mandela comes to power, he will take that revenge and do things against the whites. Many people were really afraid. And what Mandela did, it's outstanding. I'll give two examples. One example. So there is this beautiful book, Good Morning, Mr. Mandela. So it is written by the then personal secretary of Mandela. So she was a white, and again there is story of how she happened to work for Mandela. So she didn't actually, uh, wanted to work for him. So she just kind of has an employment. She somehow landed up there, and she had all these things, all the things that she heard against Mandela. And that is how many whites have been conditioned that Mandela is a terrorist and he's a bad guy and all these things. So she was kind of afraid. And then somehow a situation came where Mandela just came in front of her and he gave shake hand to her. And that moment, the kind of warmth, the kind of welcoming, the kind of affection that Nelson Mandela showed in that one single shake hand, her entire world, all the things that she had in her mind, everything had, kind of got shaken. And slowly she began to understand more about Mandela, the kind of wonderful person that he was. And again, I want you to understand Mandela could do something like that only because he did this aspect of going to the very core of him and of the other party. And now he's in process of building a third alternative. So in a situation where the blacks had all these difficult feelings and anger and resentment towards the whites, and whites were all afraid what blacks would do, in that situation Nelson Mandela is working towards a third alternative. And one of the expression is this. So after Nelson Mandela died, the personal secretary, she wrote a book about all the wonderful aspects of Nelson Mandela. And then there is this beautiful movie called Invictus, like beautiful, beautiful. So this is about how Nelson Mandela uses the game of rugby to bring the harmony between whites and blacks. So he used the rugby game as a third alternative to bring the whites and blacks together. So it's a beautiful movie. See if it is available in some OTT platform. If not, at least watch the trailer online. It's a really beautiful movie. So he could do that because whatever Stephen Covey told a certain methodology, right? Nelson Mandela actually, in his own way, used this. Now, let us go even deeper into what we just discussed. So, one way to understand, get a much more better understanding of third alternative is by understanding the seven habits and eighth habit. Again, I want to clearly say that I'm not going into the full extent of it. That's beyond the scope of a YouTube video here. So there is a tremendous, tremendous wisdom in those books. So I'll not be going into all of that, obviously. I'll just give a high level overview of things uh, to the extent that you'll get a much more better understanding of the third alternative. So there is this book of Seven Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And let us first understand what is effectiveness. And Stephen Covey defines effectiveness as P and PC balance, production and production capability. So again, let me give a quick example. Let's suppose there is a child. Let's say there is a parent and there is a child, and parent wants the child to clean the room. Actually, for you to understand this P and PC balance better, this is a metaphor that Stephen Covey gives. So there is this golden goose story, right? So there is this goose which is laying golden eggs, and so daily it is laying one egg. And the owner, once he realizes, he was very happy and he was making use of that golden eggs and all. But once he gets very greedy and he thinks, okay, if I kill the golden goose, I'll get all the golden eggs immediately, all of them at once. And he killed the golden goose and there are no golden eggs. So here, the production is the golden eggs. What is being produced? And the production capability, that which is giving the golden eggs, is the production capability, the goose here. So taking that as metaphor, so here there is a child. Now here, what is the goose? What is the production capability? The relationship the parent has with the child. And what are the golden eggs? What is the production? The child cleaning the room or keeping the room tidy and all. Now, maintaining this balance is the key here. So let's take the situation or the scenario where the parent is very strict and they're scolding the child and beating and doing all this. So doing by doing that also, they can make the child clean the room, but only to certain extent, only to certain period. Once the child grows and becomes teenager and grows up, maybe the child will become rebellious. So in the process of getting the golden eggs, the production, they are killing the goose, killing the production capability. Or if you do the reverse, you will not at all care about whether the child is well disciplined at all. You only want the relationship to be good, and you will not give any instructions and all. Now you are neglecting the production. You're taking care only of the production capability. Even that is not a good scenario. So maintaining the proper balance is the key, and that is what Stephen Covey calls effectiveness. So, for a person to become effective, he gave 7 habits, and they're organized in a certain way. The first 3 habits help a person to go from dependence to independence. So, Stephen Covey says there are 3 different levels: dependence, independence, and interdependence. So, many people think independence is the highest. Okay, I can do things on my own. That is a great stage. And there is a much more higher stage, which is interdependence, which is I can do things on my own, and I want us to work together so that we can do in a much better way, more than what we can do alone. So the first 3 habits are to move from dependence to independence. So for that, he gave 3 habits: be proactive, begin with end in mind, and put first things first. So proactive is, in a way to say, it is the opposite of being reactive. Reactive is, okay, something is happening, someone is telling me something, some situation is happening, and I'm just reacting to them. Opposite of that is being proactive. No matter what is happening, I can choose my response. I have that freedom to choose, and I'm exercising that. So that is being proactive. That is the very first step in order to make anything happen. And the second habit is begin with end in mind. So here, I thought of giving a little more context about this, because this is very relevant for our context of third alternative. It is very, very important. Beginning with end in mind. So what does Stephen Covey mean by begin with end in mind? So there is a famous quote of Stephen Covey. He gives a ladder metaphor. So he tells, before climbing up the ladder, make sure that the ladder is leaning against the right building. So after you climb the ladder and then realize you climbed the wrong building, then what's the point of it? So in the same way, so that is what the second habit is about. Begin with end in mind. What is the end? And here he tells some very powerful concepts. Again, as I told, we are not going into the full extent of it. One main aspect of that is he helps us get in touch with our mortality. So many wonderful people, many great leaders took very, very powerful decisions when they actually got in touch with their mortality, when they understood, okay, the life is limited, we are mortals. So if today is my last day, what is the most important thing? So getting in touch with that will make a person very wise. So that is what Stephen Covey encourages us to do. So to get in touch with what is really, really, really important to us, and then accordingly make a mission statement and make that the core of our life. So that is second habit. And then the third habit is whatever we realize or the most important thing in our life, keeping that as a priority. So putting first things first. So these are the first 3 habits. And then the next 3 habits come. Next 3 habits are, so first 3 habits is from dependence to independence, right? Now next 3 habits are from independence to interdependence. So this is where we involve with the people, we gain trust and all these things. Now here he gives 3 habits: think win-win, and then seek first to understand and then to be understood, and synergize. So think win-win is, so win-win is, so there are two parties. So we are one party and there is another party. Win-win is I want both of us to win, as opposed to win-lose. I want to win and let them lose, or lose-win. Okay, even if I lose, let the other person win. So both of them are not so mature. They will have other consequences in the long run. So the mature way is I want both to win. But for me to understand what my win actually is, the first three habits, that's why we started with the first three habits. Only when I feel that I can take charge of my life, which is being proactive and beginning with end in mind, what is really important to me, and prioritizing that, putting first thing first, executing that, only then I understand my win. And only that I can understand others' win. So that is very important. Now, once I do that, then seek first to understand and then to be understood. Okay, the intention is good, win-win, but I actually understanding the other person is very important. And not just understanding, we expressing is also very important. So in this context, in the context of the interdependence, Stephen Covey tells about maturity. He calls that the combination of compassion and courage. So it is very similar to the effectiveness definition that we saw, P and PC balance. So that's about the balance here also. So we need to be compassionate about others. At the same time, we should have the balance of expressing ourselves also. That is the courage. So this is very important. So once we do these things, then we get to synergize. That is where Stephen Covey talks about the third alternative. So initially he talks about that in the Seven Habits book. Then he wrote a separate book on that. And then there is seventh habit. Seventh habit is sharpening the saw. So sharpening the saw is we continuously developing ourselves physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And when we are developing, there is like an upward spiral. So we learn, we commit, we do. Again, we in turn learn, we commit, we do, like this. So this is very important, an ongoing development. So this is the seven habits. And then after a while, he wrote eighth habit. So again, as I told earlier, it's not something that Stephen Covey somehow missed. Stephen Covey tells it's a reorganization of the seven habits. So here he uses this word voice. So what Stephen Covey means by that is the unique personal significance. So everyone has this voice. And one way Stephen Covey describes it is that combination of a person's talent, what is that person really good at, and the person's passion, what does one love to do, and what is the need, in the sense what is, the world's need, is the world willing to pay money for that, and the conscience, what I feel is really the proper thing to do. The combination of all these things is the person's unique personal significance, the person's voice. And a very similar thing has been told by our Bharatiya culture also. So it tells about the swabhava of a person, and accordingly there is swadharma. Now we all these things got distorted and it formed into caste system and all, but essentially, in the olden days, the profession has been decided by a person's swabhava, the nature of the person. Accordingly, the profession. Accordingly, the system for that person. A very similar thing. Now, eighth habit is this: find your voice and inspire others to find their voice. So let's look at that in a systematic way. So Stephen Covey tells there are two approaches. One is the inside out approach, and other is the outside in approach. So if I take the inside out approach means when there is a problem, I work on myself, I enhance myself, I work within, and with that, I approach the situation outside. That is the inside out approach. The opposite of that is the outside in approach. The outside in approach is when there is a situation, I try to fix the outside things. I try to somehow take shelter in the outside things. And with that external things, I try to fix myself. Maybe it is through the money, maybe it is through the relationships, maybe it is through the power outside, the positions outside, and all. So, using that, we want to fill the void inside. That is the second approach. That is a path two. So, when we take the path one, we take the inside approach, then we find our voice. We find that unique personal significance. And once we find our voice, we inspire others to find their voice. And this is a path towards greatness. Opposite of that is when we take the outside in approach, we lose our voice. And once we lose our voice, we keep others from finding and using their voice. So that is why when we observe many times when someone is trying to do something good for the people around, something meaningful, there are a whole lot of people around them who are trying to, somehow some people may throw negative criticism, do comments, some people will go to next step and create all obstacles for them, all these things we see around. So why? Because they themselves haven't invested anything in their lives for themselves. They didn't find their own voice, and naturally they are obstructing other people's voice, and that is what will lead to mediocrity. So this is the eighth habit. So the intention of looking at the seven habits and the eighth habit is that you'll get better clarity about the third alternative. So going back to the third alternative, so we have the first alternative, my way, and we have the second alternative, which is your way or the other party's way. So I really understand. So what is the essence? What is it that I really want? And the second alternative. So with this wisdom, now I empathize with them and what is it that they really want. And with that, I come up with the third alternative. So which has the essence of the first alternative and the essence of the second alternative, and which is much more enhanced. So this is where all this new possibilities open up, the creativity happens, and all the beautiful, beautiful stuff happens. Now, I want to hear from you. What is it that you found really insightful in this video? Maybe it is something that we discussed and you found okay, this is really cool, or maybe something is happening in your life and you felt okay, I can use it, or something just came up to your mind, something got related and something popped up. So any such thing you can share in the comments below. I would love to hear. And also, if you want to know more about my work, so there is Y3 community and various trainings that are happening. So I'll be giving that relevant information below this video. You can go through that as well. So take care. Namaskaram.